Hello. I decided to make this video. I was inspired recently after the results of the recent election. I'm noticing certain personalities going out of their way to try to rationalize the behavior of Trump supporters. They're trying to come up with some rational reason other than the obvious to determine as to why they voted. I mean, they cannot get it in their head that these people are in fact racist based upon their behavior and their attitudes. They have to find another way because, I mean, honestly, that would be embarrassing to have to admit that after all these years, things have not progressed. They've actually remained the same or maybe even worsened because they've been very skillful at being deceptive and hiding things under the surface and allowing them to come out once conditions are right. There's a level of duplicity out there that I never would have imagined. But the reason why I'm doing today's video is this. I had a suspicion that I wanted to verify with regards to the nature of the animus that white people have for black people. Um, Growing up as a kid, I was in mostly mixed neighborhoods for the most part, or majority white neighborhoods for that matter. And as a person of color, I did endure racism growing up. And I noticed it kind of subside as I was getting older, racist incidents, and people became more conscious of their racism for the most part. And it became more refined where, just requirements for that black people didn't have just excluded them from certain opportunities and places. So, there was a process of refinement. You didn't have the name calling as much, obviously, in the 90s and early 2000s as you did in the 70s and 80s and 60s, obviously. But and I knew that it was something that was actually reproduced in the home with the family as far as racism. But I always thought of it as a just a dislike of something you didn't understand. Just something that I don't know it, so I don't like it. Like a almost like a little bit of a distrust. But I'm finding out after doing about 2 years of in-depth research of racism and white supremacy that it actually is much deeper than that. I mean, I really feel naive now compared to now that I'm finding out the information that I am. I've been doing a lot of research, reading books. Tim Wise, oh, Theodore W. Allen, who wrote Invention of the White Race. I highly recommend that book. It's a long read though, but I highly recommend it. Um, who else? I even read some of James Lowen, Peggy McIntosh, uh, Robin DiAngelo, uh, Neely Fuller. I was doing a lot of in-depth study research because I just couldn't quite get it that why people have these attitudes that just seem that they would, or at least it was presented to us that they would over time grow out of. But after researching Two-Faced Racism by Joe Fagan, um, I don't have a picture of that. Let me see if I can find one real quick. And here's a picture on Amazon. It's Two-Faced Racism, Whites in the Backstage and Front Stage by Leslie Pica and Joe Fagan. It basically was explaining those journals that students had, and they were writing down every time they witnessed a racial incident or they were asked to practice racism by an employer. And there was over 1,000 entries, and it was shocking. I guess even the people taking the journals down were shocked at how much they were able to information they were able to gather. But basically, the gist of it is white people have been acting in a duplicitous manner. They have been acting one way in mixed company, which is the front stage, and acting in a very racist white supremacist manner in the backstage, reinforcing stereotypes, joking about wiping out all black people, things of that nature. So after, reviewing that and then listening to different interviews from white people saying, hey, I know what white people say. I'm not racist. And then some of them, most of them not really wanting to divulge exactly what they're hearing. However, I did have a, previous associate that did kind of disclose exactly, what family members were saying that negatively. And basically she told me that she had a nephew that called all black people that she was taking pictures with parasites. So he equated black people with parasites, which is an ultimate dehumanization. Because what does a parasite mean to you? Nothing except being possibly wiped out. Um, Also, uh, there seems to be this trend that white people don't see racism unless it manifests itself in violence. So they seem to associate actual violence with racism instead of just people being oppressed and disenfranchised financially, socially, things of that nature. Um, and nowadays, even violent situations, the ones who are trying not to, it seems like they're just uh, continuing, those that want to hide it but still want to express it, even violent incidents against black people, they're able to fully rationalize. But it was kind of interesting that they only saw violence as being as a racist act. Then it kind of hit me. I was listening to a couple of admitted white supremacists speaking in an interview with, uh, about what they were looking for, and it just kind of hit me. Uh, why people why people don't they hate. Well, here's what I've heard. The worst thing you can call a white person is racist. And it kind of I said, why would being called a racist be the worst thing? I would think that being called a pedophile or a child molester would be the worst thing. But I've heard it from more than a handful, several white people say the worst thing, both on left and right, that said the worst thing you can call a white person is a racist. And I had said that just doesn't make sense to me. And I'm saying it, if they believe that it could possibly be an attitude or something like that, or that there's worse things you could be called, like a child molester, in my mind at least. Why would they think that being called a racist would be the worst thing in the world? And then it just struck me after reviewing that and going back in my own life and listening to different interviews on racist programming, counter racist programs and stuff like that. White white people associate being racist as wanting to commit genocide. They equate that if you're a racist, you want to kill every black person, that they're not worthy of life. And that is very troubling because that is the extent, that is the threshold that you have to meet to be a racist. No wonder things have not progressed any further. They don't see the average white person doesn't see themselves as participating in a system that works to further the status quo. Or even some of them who kind of surreptitiously live that double life where they, you know, feign being, inclusive and not racist in mixed company, but then revert back to to actually have their racist programming come out when they're an all white company and they feel safe. So it really makes sense. It connects all the dots. Why the visceral, reflexive, hostile response to being called a racist? Um, the dismissiveness of name calling and graffiti and maybe even pushing people of color as it's not that big a deal, because it doesn't meet the threshold of genocide, so it can't be racist. The the fear. I mean, it seems the apprehension for white people to disclose what their family members and friends are saying about people of color, the fact that they can't tell you, um, and they're supposed to be friends, and friendship, from my understanding, is based on trust. The fact that they won't disclose to you what's being said about you, is that somebody that you feel you should feel safe around? If they're not even giving you a heads up on how certain people feel. And I can imagine them in private company when people are saying, hey, I think we need to wipe out all black people, or we need to wipe out all Mexicans. Or they say, hey, you know what, you're going way too far. This is Nazi talk. This is barbaric. This is immoral. They're probably just dismissing it, and it's become uh, normalized in their mindset to think of racists as wanting the elimination. So people's elimination, so that when they see something, relatively minor happen to them, it doesn't bother their conscience at all. They've dehumanized black people of color, especially black people, to the point that they can no longer see mistreatment when they only see mistreatment as a violent act. So, with that in mind, I think, I wanted to clear up a lot of confusion that I believe is in communities of color with regards to white people and their socialization into white supremacy. I think that it's dangerous to not be suspicious at this point, especially that any white person could, you know, be a racist, and their racist programming could come out. I mean, the white women in the Trump election should be more than enough evidence to substantiate my claim. So, this is message, I think, is constructive information I'm providing for, people of color specifically, because they're the ones that are at risk and in danger on a day in and day out basis, especially with emboldened racists out there. And right now what you're saying is so-called progressives trying to negotiate or compromise with clear, uh, people with immoral people, such as Trump. The man doesn't have a moral bone in his body, but they're wanting to work with him. And, is that somebody that you can trust? Somebody that's willing to compromise with somebody who's proven to be immoral and untrustworthy? So you need to be skeptical. You need to be suspicious. Be vigilant. And as I come to learn different things, I definitely want to share them, because I think it's very important, for you to be able to protect yourself, have the information to know, how to calculate threats or not. Um, so I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave comments below. Talk to you again soon.